Now, you probably clicked on this video thinking, what is this guy talking about? How is this argument going to be made? And no way in hell a data center could be considered a form of biological life. But before you close the door too fast, I want to walk through maybe a thought experiment with you. Suppose you're an astronaut at a faraway future point in human history. You find yourself on a faraway planet. This planet contains machine-like structures. They're structures that are immense in size, and they have this interesting way of exchanging information that looks a lot like human-made computation. We experience the structures as being kind of inanimate. They just exist as they do. They process information. They seem to be communicating with one another. We don't fully understand their communications, but we know that they seem to be talking to one another. They use energy from the host star to process whatever is going on the planet, to share that information amongst one another, and this continues on, and it's fully self-sufficient, and it's also emergent. It doesn't seem to be the case that a biological form of life turned whatever that planet was into this kind of data hub. This data hub just appeared on its own. This structure just kind of exists. It seems very machine-like. We fully cannot comprehend why it's there and how it all began. But we know that these things will continue to exist for the entirety of this planet's life cycle. Okay, time to take this effect off my voice. Yeah, you're not really an astronaut. That was just a thought experiment. I mean, maybe one day, you know, but yeah, your odds aren't great. Can we consider these machine-like structures life? Can we compare whatever is happening to these giant buildings of machinery and data exchange to be similar to that of a tree or plant life, where they intake the sun's energy and they turn that energy into something for their own sake? We can't really philosophically describe why the machines exist in the way that they do. We just know that they do. Similarly, you can't describe why a tree chooses to grow, why it chooses to continue to live until eventually it dies. But what we do know is that they do, and we can describe why they do. Is this any different, a tree in comparison to data centers? Now, this is where we kind of make the distinction between that planet and ours. Data centers on our planet, AI, they're not emergent. They're made by us. They're made by biological creatures. And it's easy for us to say that they're not living because at any point we can just flip the off switch and that's it for them. They're not reproducing. The energy that they get doesn't come from them. They aren't self-reliant. We also can't fully describe them as conscious beings. We can't describe them as having their own free will. We can't describe them as having some amount of selfhood in compared to something like a human or another animal. But what's interesting here is eventually we might be able to. That whole emergent thing is not really ever possible for AI or any sort of computer tech that we can create on this planet. But it is possible that eventually you have a reality where you have humanoid bots who contain all of their memories, their stored information in giant data centers, but are just seemingly human, seemingly full of life in a similar way to biological life is. The way that this argument progresses is in deciding what our frameworks are. The criteria for what we decide as something being alive, intelligent, having moral consideration, the lines get kind of gray. But I think the important question is not the criteria that we globally put on ourselves, but the criteria you personally visiting this alien planet would describe as being sufficient, as being alien biological life. Would you be comfortable going to a place like this, knowing that whatever this computer power you were seeing were emergent, and describe it as just pure machine, not as life? That's where it gets a little bit gray. I personally don't think I'd be able to visit a planet like that, seeing as though this tech, this machine as we would describe it, being emergent could not be described as life. All in all, the thing is self-sufficient. It exchanges information. It exists for its own sake in the same way something like a tree or even a human does. We just have more of a capability to try to make sense of the reality that we're in. But that isn't to say that this machine isn't either. Maybe it also has the ability to understand itself, understand that it is one cog in a giant machine, understand that it doesn't know fully why it's there, but just knows that it is, and it is self-sufficient, and eventually it will cease to exist. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We know that when we use certain AI platforms, such as ChatGPT or Claude or whatever one ends up being your favorite, that we type in requests or we talk straight into our phone, and we are literally within minutes, sometimes seconds, given results, given responses that seem so eerily human, seem so eerily like biological life. But realistically, all that's appearing on your LCD screen, your monitor, is just a reflection of something happening at a faraway place. Things that most of us don't fully understand that occur in very large data centers where computers are fired up, where math is done, predictions are made, and you just see the result of all of that on an LCD screen. Could you have kind of a hive mind, a data center, a place where all the information that occurs on the planet is collected and analyzed, but the planet has all these drones, LCD monitor screens walking around with something like a camera, like an eyeball, where they can perceive what's happening on the planet, send back that information to this giant hive mind, collect all that information together to analyze it and figure out what exactly it all means, and send back to the drone whatever its instructions should be to do next. Does that mean that each of those individual drones are lifeless? Probably. All of the thinking, all of the managing of what is actually going on, all of the analytical, scientific, and philosophical argumentation that occurs is actually in the data center, not within each of the individual drones themselves. Are data centers on Earth in a similar circumstance right now? Or can they be at some point in the future? We know of all the testing that is currently happening with humanoid bots. These things that are supposed to resemble humans, but they're entirely silicon. But these things get their information from the internet, data centers, from faraway places, and they are just kind of a mirror of whatever is happening in those faraway locations. They are just following the instructions of something that is very far outside of itself. Could it be possible in the future that you have one of these humanoid bots be so far intelligent, so human-like, that it completely resembles regular human biological life, that it's indistinguishable from the rest of us, that they begin to move around like us and integrate themselves into societies, have families, have relationships, have more knowledge than we could ever have, because all of their knowledge can be stored in faraway locations, much bigger than just a human brain. Would we be comfortable calling these things life? Would we give them rights and freedoms? Would the law reflect what makes these things special the same way that humans are special? Would we be able to tell them that they had the right to vote, right to move around freely? The answer that most people probably give in fear of things like the Terminator movies is no. That seems horrible. And it seems like an intelligence like that would take over our planet. They'd be far more superior than us. But the issue is with how everything is accelerating, how fast technological innovation is really occurring. It's possible, and it probably will occur at some point. Is it on us to stop these data centers, to stop the progression of AI before it takes over? Is it gonna be the case that at some point in the far future, your kids, human kids, are going to be in relationships, in friendships with robots? Are there going to be people within society who rebel against robots, and they are deemed something similar to a robophobe? The distinction between life and machine will start to look blurry. But okay, I understand. There's something innate about human beings that is different from that of a machine. These things that we engineer and design are incredibly impressive, but at the end of the day, they're just math. They're just electrical signals moving through a system, through waves in the air, through kind of processes that most of us do not understand. But at the end of the day, we can decode, we can look into the systems themselves and understand exactly how they work. And we know it's just machine behaving the way that a machine should, because we designed it that way. But let me ask you something. If you are a physicalist, if you are of the belief that the mind, the conscious mind of a human being, is just purely physical matter, electrical pulses going through your brain, flesh and blood, that creates all of your memories, all of your experiences, all of your illusion of selfhood, then how do you reconcile that with what makes a machine different? A human brain is a network of 86 billion neurons. It consumes energy, it processes information, it receives inputs, it produces outputs. It's constantly changing due to its makeup of internal connections. Now, that sounds pretty complex. That sounds like something that you couldn't recreate, or at least we thought we couldn't recreate. This is what a computer is. A computer is a network of billions of transistors, which consumes energy, which processes information, which receives inputs, which produces outputs, and is constantly changing due to its internal state. The only thing we can confidently currently state is different about machine and man is this experience of selfhood, this experience of having a conscious, continuing self. But eventually, wouldn't it be possible to have computers simulate a kind of selfhood, simulate a kind of consciousness? Is that enough? Is the simulation of something that humans themselves experience enough to also be that same experience within computers? We don't just process information like computers do. We experience information. You see colors, you feel pain, you hear music, and you experience being you, a self. But even if we assume the self exists and it isn't an illusion, wouldn't it be possible, if it's all just physical, if it's all just processes occurring within our brains, to create a similar mechanism, a computer that could simulate that same experience in a humanoid bot? This subjective experience, consciousness, or qualia, as it's sometimes described, is only curated because it's in a set material condition with a set material number of reactions that occur, a cause and effect within your own mind. That cause and effect could theoretically be recreated on giant machines in data centers. Suppose these machines eventually have the ability to talk, to love, to create art, to argue passionately, to fear death, to build civilizations of their own. Would we ever be able to stop calling them machines, to call them something more than machine, to call them life itself? Regardless, the point is that eventually, probably within the next 100 or so years, maybe even sooner, the line between machine and biological life is going to start becoming more and more blurry. We're going to have to change our definitions. We're going to have to change the law. We're going to have to change how we look at moral structures themselves. And that's what I think the thought experiment itself illustrates more than anything.